We are here at the Musée des Blindés. This is a museum in France, in Saumur. It has one of the larger tank museums. There's around 200 vehicles here. So we'll just give a quick tour. So at the entrance we are confronted with M24 chassis. And we could just see the interior of the tank, pretty standard. Pretty thin armor, as you can see on the sides, or on the front, as well as the sides. We have artillery pieces and the ammunition, which is pretty standard for a military museum. Moving on to World War I vehicles, we have Renault FT-17. A very thin frontal armor at only 16 millimeters. You can see the interior, it's very tiny, very cramped up. This would actually just be a two-man team, so one person driving, one person aiming, operating the cannon. Here we have the same vehicle with a different main armament. Looks like a machine gun. Yeah, 8mm machine gun. Here's a view of the gun from the inside. Here we have the heavy tank conqueror. Now, I don't understand the layout of this museum. It's kind of, it lays out the First World War tanks and then the modern tanks, which doesn't make much sense to me, but we'll move on. This was all post-war. This was just after World War II, 1945. This preceded the Panther Tank, which is a pretty good British tank at the end of the war. The chieftain, moving on. You pause? Here we have the M26 Pershing. Now this is a very interesting tank. The only American heavy tank that could really do any work against the German tanks. There was only 2 of these that were destroyed in the war. One was confirmed to be destroyed by a Hornisse, and the other one was confirmed, I believe, by a King Tiger, but actually that one is a bit iffy. Now there's a bunch. Forget about those. These ones are modern tanks. We're going to go for the gems that were used in the war. The engine of a King Tiger. Here we got transport vehicles. Now this is post-war. That's post-war as well, actually. They're all post-war. Looks like here we have AMX-30, a minesweeping tank that was used by the Americans in the Gulf War. It's the only one in the world. Now, these are very interesting tanks. They are post-war, the ARL-44 and the AMX-50. This one that we're looking at is the AMX-50, and it's absolutely enormous. It is just huge, 66 tons, more than the Tiger, which is around 55 tons. So I'm going to stand beside this to give you some scale. The RL-44 is developed in 1945, a French tank to answer all the German heavy tanks. This one's actually quite large, quite big. Again, another French failed tank though, it wasn't a very good tank. But an interesting thing about the tracks is that, I don't know if you could see, but they're actually hollow. They're hollow tracks. Here we have another more modern piece of war here, a 105mm. This looks like a discharging sabot round, where this thing releases this extremely hard penetrating piece here that goes straight through a tank.
Or person.
I guess so. Now I'm not sure, but this looks like a high explosive anti-tank round with the cone, and the inside of the copper would be the molten, I think it's the molten copper that would shoot out of the tank. We got the Stuart Light tank. Moving on to the M8. Now, this one has a howitzer, and it was an infantry support high explosive howitzer.
De Holbeck-C M8 d'envoi Cadillac aus den Vorgestell des Lucitan Panzer M5 Helgest.
Okay, we need to work on that German.
I thought it was really good. Wait, what's this word?
Wow. 14 Stützen. So we have a person standing beside the sexton. This is just for comparison. I know she's short in real life, but it just gives you like a comparison. It's actually a pretty small thing, the sexton. There we are. On to the Russian vehicles. Now, this is a KV-1, and I see that the KV-1 is actually in disarray right now. There's missing tracks, and it's under a collapsed house. For whatever reason, the North Americans and Europeans like to picture these Soviet vehicles in disarray, because in the Toronto Museum, or not Toronto, sorry, the Ottawa Ordnance Museum, the KV-1 is destroyed as well, even though it's in working condition. So moving on to the Su-100. They claim it to be an Su-100, but I don't know. It's looking like an Su-85 to me. Alright, she's proudly saluting. Le Pack 40 anti-char. This is the Pack 40 anti-tank gun. This is the most famous anti-tank gun because it was one of the most powerful. Only more powerful than this is the Pack 43, which is an 88mm. This, by the way, is 75, and the Pack 44, which is 128mm, which is kind of rare. We're currently behind the Cromwell Tank. The Cromwell, with its very short 75mm in this museum, has some sort of, I don't recognize what that is on the front of the muzzle there. Cromwell is 75mm gun. I'm not sure if it's a 76mm frontal armor, but I could be wrong. And then we got the Churchill Tank. This Churchill actually has been penetrated. It saw combat, and that's evident by the red paint here. And that's how it was knocked out. And if you look inside, which you guys won't be able to see, but you could actually see that there's damage inside from the shell that penetrated. Sherman and this Churchill has quite heavy armor. It's heavily armored at 152mm, so that's a big cat that might have penetrated it. Tiger, Panther. Now, if any of you play Company of Heroes, you might know this cruiser tank.
Yeah, boy.
The Comet is very strong and overpowered. In real life, it wasn't as overpowered, and it was barely used, but, you know, the game's gotta, I guess, give some credit to the Brits. So here we have the Wolverine tank destroyer. Pretty standard.
Babe, why does it look damaged?
There is damage on the side, actually. And look at that.
Goodness.
There's a huge crater where otherwise the armor should be flat. This gives the impression that this probably, it's not a non-penetrating shot, which is probably a high explosive, or maybe like the Hulk. A high explosive shell that would have smashed, the concussion would have dented the metal. But it's interesting that you see this, because usually it wouldn't create such a big dent. Then again, the Wolverine's armor is very thin at around, what is it, 50 millimeters, and at the side it would be a lot less too. Here we have a Sherman, classic M4, thousands of these. There were 53,000 made, and there's a bunch of them left today. But if you actually look, curiously enough, it says, remained the symbol of their liberation. 53,000 specimens took part in every armored fight in Korea. I mean, you gotta give credit to these French people. All their French stuff is right. They might have just used Google Translate for the English stuff.
Or, you know, they probably just got a pencil because some of the stuff's been teared from the billboard. But, you know, we're not supposed to give our initial opinions. But, yes, it's a remarkable museum still.
Yes, indeed. A ZIS-2 from USSR. This one you'll see in War Thunder. It's actually mounted on a vehicle in War Thunder. They have more armored vehicles that are post-war here, which I'm not going to go into detail. They do have the T-34, which you can see, another standard. Thousands made by the Soviets. And this is a very cute little vehicle, Taiban 601. I don't know what it is, but it's very nice, very cute. And to the left of that, we have a piece of the Berlin Wall. Wow, a piece of the Berlin Wall. It says that it was offered by Berlin de la Présence Française in thank you for the French presence. Here's a little diagram of French tank innovation, which all failed, mind you. And over there, 1954 is that big-ass tank, that enormous tank. Here, we're at the beginning, or quarter way through, with the Char B1. Some more French tanks. This is the Saumur S35 47mm main gun. This one you'll see in A World of Tanks. I actually played the French in World of Tanks until the B1, and then after that all the tanks started to go downhill from there. Now this one's very interesting, the ACG-1. I haven't heard of this tank personally, but it does show signs of having been tested or having been in combat. As you can see, it's pochmarked with holes all over the place. Even on the side here. We actually see a hole at the bottom where the tracks are, the road wheels. And yet more penetrations on the right hand side. This is definitely a combat tank. Too bad they don't explain how the tank was recovered. This is a rare example of an Italian tank. They're all trash though. This Hummel was captured, and it explains here in this little description. It was encircled by American tanks and taken out in a defensive position. As you can see, the penetration from the front. Extensive damage to the armor. Walking along to the side, there's actually what looks like small arms fire. This has to be 9mm or less. This can't be. This has to be a pistol round. This can't be an 8mm Mauser, because it would have made more penetration like that, especially considering the armor is so thin. They have a Jagdpanzer IV here. A Sturmhaubitze. That's, I think, a rare example. Sturmgeschütz 3. And the very cute Hetze. All of these you'll find in War Thunder, World of Tanks, Company of Heroes, Men of War, all the World War II games that you have combat in vehicles with. This is the Marder 3. You got the Wespe, Marder again, and then another Marder behind that. And then Nebelwerfer. Number 42 on the left and 41 on the right. Moving on to the German tanks. The important German tanks. We're looking at a Panzer 1. Yeah, Panzer 1. No, Panzer 2, my mistake. Panzer 1 just had the coaxial machine gun. This is a 2cm. This is the Panzer 3. .37mm cannon. This one was widely used at the beginning of the war and the invasion in Russia. And then we have the Panzer IV with side skirts. This had a 75mm gun, 60mm frontal armor, and it's not actually outfitted with 60mm outright. This has applique armor, or extra armor that was added onto it, and you can see by this here. You can see that it was added on. See on the side? It's covered by the this paint here. Now we have the beauty. This is one of the museum treasures. This is the reason why you would come here. You have the Tiger 1 tank. This tank's beautiful. I think it's a very attractive tank. Showing here the interlocking road wheels. Now it has this paint on it. I forgot the name of the paint, but it's to prevent magnetic anti-tank grenades from sticking to the tank. And at the front, I asked the museum, one of the museum staff, and they said that this was actually a bomb or some sort of projectile that hit and caused this damage. Otherwise, though, the tank is relatively unharmed. It's in great shape. Now, before we move on, I just want to come back to this area, which is behind the Tiger tank, and point out that they have a variety of packs. They have the pack 37mm, and that was what Germany started the war off with the most. The pack 40, which is a 75mm. This baby could penetrate. I know in the Panzer IV it could penetrate. I believe it was 91mm of frontal armor. I don't know how much the pack 40 anti-tank gun could penetrate, however. Now we have the pack 38, which is a 50mm anti-tank gun, which is long-barreled. And this one I skipped over at the beginning of this room because there's too many people around it. But this tank was actually taken out, and then it was repaired by the Allies, and somehow this museum, it was donated to the museum in the same shape that it was after it was repaired, right during the war. There's actually an anti-tank shell that is lodged inside of the armor, which is incredible. Damage from another tank shell. And the extensive damage caused. the armor splintered and cracked. It means the armor was hardened at too much of a, it was too hard, so the armor cracked instead of bent. Or they were missing the required materials to create sufficient armor to withstand shock. Now we are standing behind the beautiful Panther Tank. This Panther has side skirts as well. And I don't know the story behind this Panther, but it looks like it saw combat as well. Right here. There's a pretty deep, around 3 centimeters deep, 3.5 centimeters over there, penetration. And under the gun, in the gun, the cupola over there, there's a penetration. It's not, that's definitely not 8mm Mauser, or not Mauser, or Mosin Nagant or Enfield. It's probably 20mm, or maybe an anti-tank rifle. There's more damage under the gun, and yet more under the mantlet, on the mantlet. On the other side, we see a broom bar. There's a Jagdpanther. This Sherman was used by the Israelis. It doesn't give any description, but I know it was used by the Israelis. It was used post-war, and might even have been used in the 6-Day War. Now, this is the reason why Musée des Blindés is so important, because it has, as the sign says, le seul au monde en état de marche, the only King Tiger that is in working condition. This King Tiger could actually drive, and they start it up every now and then for shows. Incredible. The thing about this King Tiger is it's actually not as big as you would think it is. The AMX-50, which I showed before, is actually much more imposing, much larger. Mind you, it was a much later period in time, but this tank is still beautiful and very large itself. Very long cannon, very long main, 88mm gun. I believe this gun could penetrate 180mm of frontal armor. Same with that. Same with the Jagdpanther, because it had the same gun. Now, interestingly enough, we have the Panther with the 75mm long-barreled gun. That one, I believe it penetrated around 131mm. And the Tiger tank with the L51 88mm, which was a shorter barrel than the 75mm of the Panther, penetrates around 129. I think it was the Panther penetrates slightly less than the Tiger, with 80mm of frontal armor, and the Tiger having 100mm of frontal armor. Now, it does say 120 here, but I don't know if that's true. I don't think it's true. Anyway, I'm just going to show you guys one more thing. This Tiger is just beautiful looking from the front. That's its shell up there. Enormous. Absolutely enormous shell. And this is how thick the armor is. This is the frontal armor of the King Tiger. No King Tiger was penetrated during the war from the front, and this is probably why. If you look at my hand, I have a regular sized hand. This is unbelievable. The thickness of this is incomprehensible. It's just enormous. It's absolutely enormous. And the fact that it had this all over the front, unbelievable. And 80mm of side armor, unbelievable. Now this shows 185mm of frontal armor. I don't know about that. I do know that it had 150, but that could be the mantlet, that could be the turret or the mantlet, I don't know. Anyway, thank you for watching my review. I appreciate the views, and I hope that you really took something out of this, because I do appreciate watching museum videos, as sometimes I can't reach those places. I hope you could take the same thing out of it as I do. Thank you.